Within minutes after the killing of Renee Nicole Good by an ICE agent, the Trump administration, including Donald Trump, began an all-out campaign to describe her as a domestic terrorist without providing the public with any evidence to support that claim. When asked to clarify why Secretary Noem jumped to that conclusion so quickly, Secretary Noem doubled down on the comments she made, again, with no evidence provided to back them up. Watch.
You said that she was a domestic terrorist. How do you define domestic terrorist?
She weaponized her vehicle to conduct an act of violence against a law enforcement officer and the public. They are doing that.
How can you assert with certainty that she was trying to hurt the officer as opposed to she was trying to flee the scene?
If you look at what the definition of domestic terrorism is, it completely fits the situation on the ground.
That's not true, but we should also note that analysis of the video shows that Renee Nicole Good was steering away. She had turned the tires away from the officer before he opened fire. Noem's definition of domestic terrorism, quote, an act of violence against a law enforcement officer, actually came back to bite her in the rear end later in that very interview. Watch.
I want to show some video to you right now and ask, what is the appropriate response for the police officers in this situation? Those are law enforcement officers being physically attacked. By this standard, would any of those officers be justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation is going to rely on the situation those officers are on. But they know that when people are putting hands on them, when they are using weapons against them, when they are physically harming them, that they have the authority to arrest those individuals.
The president pardoned every single one of those people.
And make sure that they're getting justice for their actions going forward.
President Trump pardoned every single one of those people.
And every single one of these investigations comes in the full context of the situation on the ground. And that's one thing that President Trump has been so focused on, is making sure that when we're out there, we don't pick and choose which situations are and which laws are enforced and which ones aren't.
I just showed you video of people attacking law enforcement officers. Undisputed proof, undisputed evidence. And I just said President Trump pardoned all of them. And you said that President Trump is enforcing all the laws equally. It's just not true.
I can't cover her without sort of injecting what she's told us about her own personal character. The sadistic act of shooting her own dog is something she writes about in her own book. So that's who's running all of this as a starting point.
Well, she's not really running anything. Let's be real. She is a complete puppet, and Corey Lewandowski is running the Department of Homeland Security. Actually, he's following directions of Stephen Miller, who is running it. And there's no question that she can't even put a coherent sentence together to respond to those questions because she doesn't actually understand the things that she's saying. Obviously, even if she drove her car directly at the officer, that's not domestic terrorism. But what you said is exactly right, which is, first of all, if she wanted to use her car as a weapon, why did she back up? And then why was she clearly turning the steering wheel? But what really is remarkable here is they've made up their mind. They made up their mind before seeing many of the videos. And they already concluded, from Trump to Noem to J.D. Vance to Stephen Miller, that this guy was acting within his rights to shoot her 3 times, shoot a moving vehicle, which is against all law enforcement training, and shoot her 3 times in the head and kill her. And yet now we're supposed to believe that the FBI is going to do an independent investigation and that they're actually, of course not. That is garbage. They are sweeping this under the rug, as they do with anything that is politically damaging to them. And then they'll focus on, as we were just talking about, Jerome Powell or anybody Donald Trump doesn't like. It is the definition of unequal prosecution. And what part of the problem is the law, which is why I'm introducing a bill that would change qualified immunity for that officer, because it is true that if the officer subjectively believes that he was at risk, and there's a broad standard that, you know, in the blink of an eye, do you know yes or no, then he is immune from liability. So I'm trying to change it to an objective standard, which is to say a reasonable officer in that situation, what should they have done? Because in some cases, yes, they should have qualified immunity. But in this particular case, where you have these rogue officers in masks, totally militarized, absolutely demonizing and terrorizing cities and communities all around the country, separate and apart from whether they're immigrant communities or not. Americans, Renee Good is an American, and this is what they are bringing. You know, you talk about Venezuela, like this is what a dictator rules with secret police that are indiscriminately killing people, that he's telling oil companies he's going into Venezuela before he tells Congress, like the oligarchs in Russia. He's using our criminal justice system as a political tool. That is the number one lesson that we give to other countries around the world about the step one for democracy. I mean, just look at what is going on. It is Vladimir Putin's playbook that Donald Trump is following, and he has all of these lackeys who are just doing his bidding for him, and it's disgraceful, and it's going to cause real damage to this country, to our own national security. Let's be real. This is not something like it's just going to stay in Venezuela or overseas. Yeah. It's going to come back, and it's going to bite us in the ass. I
mean, that's the subject of some of your recent reporting about how the FBI and the DOJ have been essentially gutted, and decades of experience in counterterrorism, counter cyber, counter sex trafficking, counter drug cartels. All that expertise has been purged because those happen to be the people I think that you were referencing at the top of the hour who believe in the rule of law.
Yeah, look, half of SDNY is working on document production for Epstein. Senior leaders in major U.S. attorneys' offices across the country are working on the president's political prosecutions. The Times just broke the story earlier today that the number 2 in EDVA, as the congressman was pointing out, just quit or was fired over his lack of whatever. The hollowing out of the Justice Department is, I think, a politically risky thing, because the first basic question whenever anything happens is, what did the FBI and Justice Department know, and what did they do? And look, Donald Trump is playing with a lot of different volatile things, whether it's on the international stage, or if it's domestically, or if it's economically. And so far, the consequences for him politically, while I'm sure people will point to his approval ratings, have not been catastrophic.
Well, he hasn't been impeached, but he is more unpopular than he was during COVID.
Fair. But if you're playing with all of these really important things in highly unusual ways, in ways that we haven't seen recent precedents, I just think he's exposing himself.
And exposing
the country.
Yeah.
But he has an ability to persevere through these types of things in ways that certainly other politicians don't.
I mean, and I guess that's the bottom line. I mean, when does sort of the rule of law snap back? Does it?
I hope it does. I think the first thing is, though, with someone like Kristi Noem, she needs to be under oath being asked questions.
Before the congressman, yeah.
Before Congress and answering questions, because she said a number of things during that interview that were not only against protocol, like why is she said to Jake Tapper she was talking to the officers, that she was the one talking to the supervisors afterwards. Like, that's not what you would expect the secretary to do. That's OIG or DOJ. Yeah. Like, she has no law enforcement experience. And then she believed, based on those conversations, she knew the truth.
And then said it publicly. It's all bananas. Thank you for being here. Keep coming back.
Always.